All right, well, let's get started. I think there's a few people still missing. Phil, you want to come on up? I know you're the designated alternate today. So appreciate you all coming. Happy New Year. Hopefully you all had a chance to get some time off at the end of the year. And of course now it's pedal to the metal and everything's flying forward again. So let's start by just the introductions. And then I'll go through the agenda and we'll go through. So you wanna?
Sure. Marissa Weinberg, Forestry, Fire and State Lands.
And Jeff Denbleicher with Jacob.
Ryan Rowland, USGS, Utah Water Science Center.
Christine Rumsey, USGS.
Bill Brown, Great Salt Lake Ranchum Cooperative.
Jim Harris, Water Quality.
Linda Freitas, Friends of Great Salt Lake.
Bonnie Baxter, Great Salt Lake Institute, Westminster University.
John Lapp, Wildlife Resources.
Ben Stireman, Forestry, Fire and State Lands.
Andrew Rupke, Utah Geological Survey.
Elliot Jachnecki, Utah Geological Survey.
Joe Havasi, Compass Minerals.
Jennifer Biggs, Forestry, Fire and State Lands.
And go to the back there.
Connor Steinman, new biologist with Wildlife Resources, Chief Slough.
Kyle Stone, Division Wildlife Resources.
Ben Trent, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Laura Brennan, Division Water Resources.
Ryan Doherty, Cargill Salt.
Okay, and then online, I see Heidi Hoven, National Audubon, Jack Ray, and Rob Dubuque. Sam Vetta, he's on our agenda for today from Utah State University, and Layla Ahmadi. I think that's everybody. Great. And Layla, are you going to be Craig's alternate today?
Craig should be coming.
I think it should be coming in.
Okay, great. And then I know Thomas sent me an email. Neither he nor Tim Hawks could be here today, so he designated Phil to be his alternate. So, but
Mark Reynolds was asking me to.
Oh, great. Thanks. You want to come up? You're good.
I can see.
I get it, I smell
All right, and then I just Blake Bingham joined us as well online. So thanks for coming. So just an overview of our agenda. We have a number of updates on lake conditions, update on our salinity forecast or approximation for this year, update on the berm recommendations, and then wanting to, I guess, try to pivot looking forward to the future again. Wanted to get an update from Dr. Dutta. Again, he's been working on a model for the Union Pacific Bridge for some time, and it's been, I think, over a year since we've heard from him on the work that he and his team are doing. So I asked him if he could give us an update on what they're doing, and then wanted to start to talk again, assuming we have some time to think about what are the other key elements that we need to develop this long-term, our goal of developing a long-term salinity management plan. I think we've been doing a great job of managing on the fly, but how can we try to get in front of that and kind of, I guess, develop scenarios or guidance for the state agencies as they manage that opening, manage the salinity of the lake. So anything else anybody wants to make sure we cover today? All right. Well, then I included in the package that went out a summary of our November 30th meeting. That was our last salinity committee meeting, and wanted to see if anybody had any comments or changes that they wanted to make to that. And if not, I would entertain a motion to approve that summary.
I make a motion to approve the summary.
Great, thank you. And a second?
Second.
Thanks. Any other discussion? If not, and just by voice, all those in favor of approving summary? Anybody opposed? Thank you. Passed unanimously. All right. Christine or Ryan, have you been able to link in? So I guess next on our agenda is just an update on our lake conditions.
Okay, so we're gonna kind of do our usual update here. We'll talk a little bit about lake elevations and discharge. We'll give and then Christine will take over and give an update on salinity and then the spring salinity forecast. So here's the lake surface elevation of the south arm. We have data from October 2021 to present, and then it's daily lake elevation on the y-axis. Let's just kind of go out to the most recent data. As of yesterday, the elevation of the south arm was 4192.7 feet. During our last meeting, the elevate, which we gave data for November 28th, it was at 4192.3 feet, so up about 4/10 from then. The seasonal low at this site was on October 1st, 2023, and that was at 4192.0 feet. So from that seasonal low on October 1st up to yesterday, the south arm has come up 0.7 feet. And then for the north arm, just looking at this is the same period of data, October 2021 to present, and at daily elevations again on the y-axis. So as of yesterday, the elevation of the north arm was at 4189.9 feet. For our last meeting, we showed a daily elevation, so that was for November 28th, of 4189.3. So we're up about 6/10 from that last meeting. And the seasonal low at this site was actually measured on September 1st, 2023 at 4188.8 feet. And from that seasonal low in September to present, the north arm has come up about 1.1 feet. So that's where we're at. And so right now, so this plot shows daily elevation on the y-axis and some data from October 2021 to present. The red line is for the south arm of the lake. The green arm is the north arm of the lake. And currently, we just look out to the far right of this plot. The south arm is 2.8 feet higher than relative to the north arm of the lake. So that is where we stand with lake elevations right now. Are there any questions on that? Okay. Let's take a look at our gauges on some major surface water inflows. So this is a little different. In the past, I've shown cumulative flows, but I'm going to start off today just showing average daily discharge in cubic feet per second on the y-axis, and then the time frame is October 1st, 2023 to present. So the current water year we're in. The blue line is the average daily discharge value measured at the gauge. The yellow line is the median daily value based on 66 years of record at this particular site. So the blue line, the measured values for this water year have been tracking pretty well with the median value up at this point. And if you notice at the far right of the plot along the bottom axis, you see a bunch of blue marks. And if you go above, you notice our data line ends. And that's because we have ice conditions at the Corinne gauge right now. So we have about a week and a half where we don't have a daily discharge value. Okay, so that's why I'm not showing you a cumulative discharge plot for this site for the entire water year. We need to continue our field work and produce our estimates of daily discharge during this ice period. Okay, and we're not done with that at this point. You hit next. Okay, exact same format plot here for the Weber River near Plain City. Same time frame. We don't have an ice period. We haven't experienced an ice period at this site just yet. So I have a complete record of daily discharge shown with the blue line, and you see the yellow line, which is the median daily values based on an extended period of record at this site, 74 years. And just looking out just past December 30th of 2023, you see the blue line drops off significantly. So daily flows measured to this gauge have recently dropped off significantly from about, I want to say 400 CFS down to, we're down below 100 CFS now. And so that has to do, I'm sure, with some kind of upstream management. And I'm not a part of that circle. We're just focused on measuring these flows. That's our job. So here's the Goggin Drain near Magna, Utah. Same format plot. For a lot of the water year, the blue line, the measured daily values have been above the yellow line or the median. And more recently, we're tracking just a little bit below the median. But, overall, not doing too bad at the site in terms of tracking kind of median values. Next. This is the Farmington Bay outflow bridge. Once again, we've tracked with the blue line. It has tracked fairly well with the median flows measured at this site, and that's based on a much shorter period of record. This is a much newer gauge. It's only 17 years involved in the calculation of the median statistic. And just recently, to the far right of the plot, you see the blue line is right on the median on the statistic. So next slide. Okay, so given what I said about ice, etc., I can, because we have not had ice conditions at the Weber River, Goggin Drain, or Farmington Bay outflow, we can look at the cumulative flows at those sites. So this is for the Weber River at Plain City, cumulative stream flow in millions of acre feet. On the y-axis, it's a log scale, and then the bold black line in the plot is the data for the water year. Okay, so the x-axis is a water year, and the bold black line is the data for the current water year. The green zone is the 25th to 75th percentile, and the light gray line in the middle of the green zone is the median, or the 50th percentile. So you can see that black line for a lot of the first part of the water year tracked near the top of the 75th percentile or more, and it's just been recently here in January that we don't have a steady increase. Flows have leveled off or decreased at this site, and so our cumulative flows have leveled off. So same type of plot for the Goggin Drain. It's a pretty similar story. So you see the bold black line is tracked above the 75th percentile, but in December and January, the slope of that increase has slowed up a little bit, but we're still above the 50th percentile of the site. And here's this same type of plot for the Farmington Bay outflow gauge. Again, it's a shorter period of record there. The bold black line has been tracking with the historic data. It's been in that green zone and remains there now. So we're roughly the 50th percentile for this day here. Okay, so as you all know, we measure discharge at the new breach. Our most recent, so I'm showing data from July of 2021 out to our most recent measurement, which was made on January 19th. We have discharge in cubic feet per second on the y-axis. The blue dots are south to north flow. The red dots are north to south. And the gray line is the elevation difference between the salt air gauge or the south arm and the saline gauge, which represents the north arm. Let's just look at data from October, November 2022 out to present. Looking at the gray line, which is the elevation difference, it's remained relatively steady over time. But as we know, this berm right now is acting like a weir. So we have water from the north free falling over to the north side of the lake. And those flows, like measured on December 5th and January 19th, so 962 CFS on January 19th, 928 CFS on December 5th, they've been relatively stable recently. So this kind of gets to the South Arm's increase in elevation has been, modest. So there's as we build more head up on that berm structure, the flows will increase, but they've maintained relatively steady these last few measurements. That's it for my update. Are there any questions? Okay.
Great. Okay, so we'll switch gears to salinity now. This is a plot showing salinity in grams per liter on the y-axis over time, starting in about October of 2021. So I'm starting off with kind of our truncated record here the past couple of years, just to show you kind of recent changes. Where we're sitting, the most recent measurements we have are from December 5th, and those were roughly 140 and 138 grams per liter for the surface. If we, and for all of the surface sites, the one that stands out, as we might expect, is the site near Berm Bay outflow. That one was a little more dilute at 129 grams per liter, but overall, the rest of the sites are pretty well mixed. If we look at the change in salinity relative to November of 2022, so about last fall, currently we're more dilute by about 45 grams per liter in this, in Gilbert Bay, as measured at 3510, 47 grams per liter more dilute as measured at 2565 in Carrington Bay. So we've kind of reached our high for the fall, and now we're starting to see gradual dilution. If we just look at our historical period of record back to 2010, we're well within our optimal range, or the range this group has decided, of 120 to 160 grams per liter. Again, those are based on measurements from December 5th. We also have recent measurements at the new breach that was taken last week, January 19th. Those values were 132 grams per liter. So we are seeing more dilute conditions at that breach opening. Also seeing lower salinities at Saltaire as measured on January 2nd, 129 grams per liter, probably due to some precipitation events we had going on there. So that's kind of the salinity status. Any questions there? If not, I'll kind of jump into the forecast. Okay. I'm gonna just share the equations because I can't get away from it. So we're using, because I want to reiterate that this is it's a relatively simple approach. Okay. So I'm taking the December condition that we measured, concentration and the volume at that time on December 5th to get a mass, how much salt mass is in the south arm. And then these next terms are predictions, estimations. How much do we predict export of water and brine from south to north? How much do we expect surface water inflows to come in? And how much do we expect volumes to change relative to from now to next spring? So these are kind of the components that are built into this calculation. And I just wanted to highlight the things when I do these forecasts, I get quite nervous because there's so many things that you can play with here to get a result. And then I just want to be explicit about the things that we are modifying and estimating in this equation. The timing of berm modification, that makes a difference in the salinity forecast. And I will say, I'm forecasting it to May 31st. That's kind of the date that this prediction will be. So the timing of berm modification matters. The percent of Bear River mixing into the south arm matters. So how much is the Bear coming in, able to mix in the south arm before being exported to the north? That's an estimation that I'm making. South to north discharge, so that's the flow at the new breach. I'm estimating that it's about 1,000 CFS based on our more recent measurements in December, and then I'm just adding 100 CFS until we get to May. The climatic condition, this is based on the last 10 years of data that we have, and I'll show you kind of an average condition versus a high and low precipitation condition. So just want to be explicit that there are many things that I'm guessing here, and I'm open to feedback. I'm open to if people have suggestions on how to improve the guesses I'm making. But I just want to make that clear. And then the model assumptions, I think we've gone through before, but I just want to spell it out and make sure everyone knows this model assumes that it's instantaneous mixing. So as soon as the water comes in, it's mixed in the south arm across the whole thing. I hold the surface area constant when we think about direct precipitation and evaporation. That's simply because this is a simple approach. And I would like to reiterate on a more sophisticated method, but that's where it is right now. The salinity export is held constant. I'm estimating inflow salinity is 4 grams per liter. So that's when we think about rivers coming in, that's the concentration I'm assigning. And I am assuming that for the scenarios where the berm is raised, that it's raised to an extent where there is no flow from south to north and that there's basically cut off, the south and north arms are cut off. So having said all of that, thanks for your patience with all that, the detail. The first thing I'll share is a scenario where we estimate 40% mixing of the Bear River coming in. If you recall from our last meeting, I had done an assessment of 2023 conditions, estimating that about 60% of the Bear River mixed that year. That condition was when we had the berm up and the water was able to come in and mix for a time before overtopping. My hunch is that we're going to get less mixing this year since we already have overtopping and we have a V notch in the berm. So that's this scenario. And for that, I'm just guessing, okay, what if we raise the berm on April 1st? We get 40% of the Bear River mixing up to that point, and then 100% mixing of water after that. For a number of different climatic conditions. So for average conditions, again, using 2012 to 2022, that spits us out at about 126 grams per liter. If we consider a couple of different climatic scenarios, so 90% precipitation, we get more dilution down to about 123 grams per liter. And then for a drier condition, so 20% precipitation, 128. So that just kind of gives you a sense of how much variability playing with the climate gives you. So about maybe a 6 gram per liter difference for a 90 versus a 20th percentile precipitation. And then I also just wanted to throw up here, in my previous calculations, I had used a berm, raising the berm at February 15th based on last year. That's what that does. It basically dilutes it another 2 grams per liter. So the timing of when you raise the berm affects the forecast. And then here's the scenario where we don't raise it at all. It's more concentrated, 129 grams per liter relative to the raising on April versus not raising. It's about a 3 gram per liter difference is what we're estimating there. So that's a lot. Any questions or clarification on that?
Can I just say one thing too, just for a point of clarification? So we're the percent of Bear River mix into the south arm column, where it starts off with 40% until April 1st, and then it jumps to 100% after April 1st. Is that because the lake elevation then? Can you explain that?
Sure. So on April 1st, I'm saying, okay, the berm is raised to 5,000 feet. Nothing can get past it. And so then any surface inflows coming in mix 100, like all those Bear River flows mix 100% in the south arm. So kind of maximizing dilution in that condition versus not having that.
So this is raising the berm to capture everything.
Correct. Yep, exactly. Mm-hmm. And then if that's enough, we can stop. But I also did just a 60% mixing just because that's what we had last year. I'll just kind of go through all of the things, but it's more dilute essentially. We fall maybe 3 grams per liter less than a 40% mixing condition. But this is, I'm open to feedback on how to present this with more clarity, but there's many, I just want to make it clear, there's many levers that I'm playing with and they each have an effect on that value. So any questions?
I do. Under your mixing model assumptions, you have instantaneous mixing. Is that kind of the Greek ideal?
It's just kind of, I guess so. I don't, know that term, but it's like, it's kind of the best we can do with a mathematical equation. Because there's a lot of time, that it takes time to mix in the real world, but with these simplified assumptions, the math assumes that it's instantaneous.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think one thing to point out, you had in the bottom right-hand corner is that's where our objective was for our protocol. So we want to be during the spring, we want to be less than 130 so that we can benefit the hatching of rain shrimp.
Okay.
Any other questions on that? All right, well, I think that dovetails in nicely with the next agenda item, was just the update on the berm recommendations.
Yep. So everybody that's on the committee should have received a letter from Director Barnes. It addressed both the recommendation from April last year regarding the protocol, and then also the recommendation that was made in November regarding raising the berm again. And so I don't know that we need to, or I'm probably not going to go through the whole letter. If you all have questions specifically, I think that now would be the time to ask and I can respond to those. But I think in general, the basis of this was that, April, when we were looking at the management protocol, there was also just right before that, we had the commissioner's office was formed in law, and we had some discussions with the commissioner, with the legislature about, waiting on the commissioner to adopt anything as well. And I think that having the commissioner in place to make sure that we were adopting something that they weren't immediately going to have to go in and exercise their power to over us on those things to object to our decision. So we waited, and in that time, as you all know, the berm modified itself. And so I think our protocol effectively was difficult to manage at that point, because I think we'd already seen some changes. So once the commissioner was on, I think everybody agreed that since the berm had already lowered itself, it was exporting quite a bit of water and salt through that, and squared everything up. Perhaps wasn't the best use of resources at that time. So that's where we were at on that. And so we wanted to make sure we were responsive to that recommendation because we hadn't previously responded. And then as far as the November recommendation goes, I think that we had a great discussion, and I think that there's a lot of thought that went into, what it looks like to raise the berm. But I think that this committee is based on the scientific evidence and what's, feasible and how we get the best bang for our buck on managing salinity. But I don't think that we always take into account, all of the different policies and politics and everything else surrounding that. So when I took that recommendation back after that, it was pretty evident to me that this is that we needed to analyze, the lake as a whole and take into account elevations on the north arm and other things. So we did our diligence on that, and I think what we learned on that is that we probably can't. There's probably not the will right now to modify the berm to capture that inflow. But I think that, what that meant for me is that we need to focus in on how we get better mixing in the south arm. So perhaps the berm isn't the only tool that we have. Because I think that, forgive my reference, but playing God on the lake and saying, how we're modifying flows and things, it has a lot of other repercussions. So I think that the best thing that we can do as a committee is to try to develop that salinity management plan, and something a little more technical than the rockfill berm, that we can more micromanage how we're doing sending water to the north arm, and then also better model it. I mean, Craig, I think you guys would probably appreciate a better flat weir rather than a big old jagged rockfill berm to model and understand what's moving through there.
We've struggled with that.
Yeah. So I think that those are some of the issues with the projections and trying to understand, what the repercussions of our modifications might be. And so our division really wanted to make sure that everybody knows that the work of the committee has really guided everything that we've done on the berm. And so everything up to this point has been a product of the science that has come out of this committee. And we feel that it's been invaluable. And honestly, I think I can say from, attending many of the other committees and councils and things on the Great Salt Lake, that more action has come from this committee than probably anywhere else that I can think of outside of the lakes. And I don't mean to demean anyone else. I just mean that you guys do a hell of a lot of work, and it's all basically for free. And we're getting some great, we're getting some great results out of what we've done. And so I think it's, I think we'll probably see that there, we're working with some sponsors to potentially see some, maybe some funding to engineer something a little bit better than, the berm right now, and how we can keep better mixing. And then also, I think it's going to be, pretty prudent that we develop that salinity management plan. And I also think it's also, I think it would be a good exercise to go back to and understand, how that deep brine layer formed in, since the opening of the causeway, and the effects of all the salt that we imported from the north arm when that was open. And I think we're kind of playing catch up on it, sending that salt back to the north arm right now. And so, at this point, I think that we are making some good headway. And I think, Christine, what I'm seeing from your, graph is that we had a reaction to what was sent here, and we successfully were able to send a lot of it back. So I'm kind of hopeful that perhaps we're not having to be so aggressive with the management of the berm, and that, regular inflows will help do the trick. And I think that the better mixing is probably a better target for us or a more innovative approach to how we send water across rather than focusing on like how much we raise and lower the berm every year. Because it was our conclusion that the berm is a tool right now for, when we're in those danger zones, for salinity. And right now, I think what you've shown is that we're in an okay spot. So anyway, that was the reality of the situation. So if anybody has any questions about, how we came to those conclusions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Yes.
I just a couple of comments. We're already playing God in that there's a causeway.
Yeah.
Right. So humans have already intervened in this system.
Mm-hmm.
The berm is not an intervention that's any less serious than the causeway, right?
So reaction to the causeway, right?
Right. So the other thing is that I think it's going to be hard to find a cheaper and more quick intervention than that berm is, right?
Yeah, and
you're talking about building something and paying for the engineering
Sure.
and that. So I think for the crisis period, it worked. It was inexpensive, and it just augmented an intervention that was already present. So I just want to say that,
Oh yeah, and I wouldn't disagree with anything you said. I wouldn't
Right.
have done anything different with the berm. I think it was what we had to do, and it was the tools we had.
right.
But
And
at this
I'm
point,
not-
though,
yeah, right.
I think there's other things that we could do that could advance that. And I don't think the state is necessarily looking for the rusty Honda Civic dependable, version. Like it's okay to
Right.
upgrade and we get that Camry and
I think that would
with the
be
leather
great.
seats and do our thing. Because there is I don't think we need to be cheap on this. This is really important, like you said. The causeway's there.
Right.
So using a bunch of rocks that are unreliable.
Right.
And we can't model that worked to
I've
get us out of the
almost lost a
crisis.
couple students on those
Yeah.
rocks, just so you know.
Oh yeah,
But
no, please don't.
I've been arguing for some
That'll make it even
time.
harder for us to do the work if you start losing students.
Oh, man.
Right.
Should have listened to USGS. They don't go out when it's windy.
Yeah.
I've been arguing for a long time for a giant stir bar as an intervention, but we would need a magnet underneath, so that might be expensive. That's not really what I want to say. I just wanted to make those comments. I think it's been great to be on this committee. I think we have done amazing work at standardizing salinity procedures, at coming up with these equations, at figuring out what the salinity ranges should be. When I first joined this committee, I thought it would be a 6-month assignment, and then Jeff holds us over the fire and makes us come for years now. So I'm confused after I got the letter. I'm confused about the future of this committee, and are we done here? Do you have everything
No.
you need from us?
We definitely don't.
And- Yeah,
I think the main thing is the salinity management into the future. I
Right.
think we need to decide, exactly what that might look like. And I
but
think
if we have tools from Sam and Christine, do we still need this committee and every other committee in the commissioner's office? And I'm just really confused
Yeah.
about what we're
I
doing.
mean, I
Not
would
that I
ask
don't love
Bonnie,
you guys.
where else do they discuss this in any of those other committees? I
Right.
think this is the technical backbone of those committees, so they
Right.
refer on those things. So I agree, there's a ton of different committees and
And how is it
organizations that do
different?
those things.
Like, how is the role here different than maybe what the role of the tech team should be? Because it's the technical advisory team
Sure.
for Forestry Fires. I'm just
Yeah.
trying to understand, because I'm outside of the state
Yeah.
agencies. How do you see this committee functioning going forward differently than these other?
Yeah, I think that this committee is more focused on the technical aspects of salinity only, because that's a huge problem that we've had,
Right.
understanding, standardizing processes. So I think that that's the technical backbone for things like that.
And the tools we've built don't stand for this committee now. We still need to be here to work on those and tweak those.
Well, I
and
mean,
make
everybody's
decisions.
welcome. Nobody has to be here, right?
Right,
So if someone felt like their time was not being used valuably, if it was not valuable to you and you weren't receiving anything from that, then you don't have to be here. There's no obligation. to
I'm
anybody.
not saying, I just want to say,
Yeah.
I love these people. I'm happy to be in this room. I've learned so much So I'm really playing devil's advocate
Yeah,
about like,
Of course.
what
that's
is
fine.
the purpose of this committee going forward and how does it differ? And I mean, do we meet less? Do we, how does your letter
Sure.
change what we do here? That was my first question when I got it.
Yeah, no, to me, it doesn't, I don't think it changes anything. I think that I think one of the things that we bring back from that is that
Uh-huh.
there's things outside of the technical realities of the berm that our division has to consider. This committee doesn't, right?
Okay,
Like, that's
yeah,
not the
yeah.
charge of this committee to go understand every law that's out there or the political paradigm that we're in.
Yep.
The charge of this committee is to develop those standards and give us a recommendation that we can then go take and try to work through that. That's what we did. We had some realizations while we were working through some of those things
Sure.
that
With
we
the
had
new
to bring back.
structure, yeah.
So if that, I mean, again, I think that I find a ton of value in what we come here and learn. What Christine just, did today, we're not getting that anywhere else. There's nowhere else where we get that information. And it's also just, it's also a place that other people can come to gather that information. I think having people to think critically about the information all in one room in itself has value. I think we don't have to meet as often if we're not talking about modifying the berm, if we're not talking about, ongoing issues. It might be something where we could slim back on that.
Right.
But right now we just had a pre-bid meeting yesterday with our contractors for the Great Salt Lake Comprehensive Management Plan.
Yeah.
And I see salinity management as one of the, primary components of what we're going to do into the future. So
Uh-huh.
the berm we have on the causeway is one tool that we've used to manage salinity, but there's probably a whole slew of other things that we should be doing to consider salinity. And I know that you're concerned about the microbialites and the brine flies and the brine shrimp. So I think that this is the place where we can identify those solutions and anything that we have to move that forward. So
But I'm also concerned about the pelicans, right? So
Sure.
it's like, it's not that, we're all
Yeah.
advocates for one particular thing.
well, that's why we
Yeah.
have this committee, so we can
Right,
worry
right.
about the pelicans and we can worry about industry and we can worry about the south arm. But finding that balance, that's the purpose of the committee, is to be able to try to make a recommendation that takes those things into consideration.
Uh-huh.
Like, there's different disciplines here that should be able to consider all of those factors. So I would just say that that's another reason why this committee is so important, is because nobody else is doing that in the lake.
So
And
what-
we could wrap this into the tech team,
Yep.
but then we're also wrapping in all of the other things that the
Right.
tech team does, which is we're not focused on salinity and in-lake, brine management and the things that are affecting us.
So
So-
could the tech team become a place where we are having presentations from Salinity, from GSLEP, from
Mhm.
like where you're pulling all of the recommendations towards,
It could
build
be.
together.
I think the tech team right now has served as a place where we have a technical body that identifies research gaps,
right?
and
Right.
they are pulling that in, and then those research gaps those folks come and present to the technical team. And I think that could be more efficient, and we're working on a database or some way to better manage the data we get. But I don't know that the tech team is the one that needs this report. It's probably more of,
Yeah, yeah.
the advisory council and folks that are making decisions that are based on these. So
Right.
we already do that, though. The advisory council typically gets an update. And so, the tech team to me is a kind of a clearinghouse that meets far less often to address novel research. I mean, they fund a lot of the project. We fund a lot of projects through Westminster
Right.
that really don't have anything to do with salinity. They have a lot more to
Sure.
do with the effects of salinity or
Sure.
other aspects of that. So I see them as being separate and having their own purposes. But again, like, maybe this is a conversation we can have offline, and you can tell me your ideas for how we could better.
I don't
manage
have
that.
any ideas. I just wanted to like have a conversation with everyone about that, because I don't know if anybody else got that feeling when they got the letter of like, okay,
Sure.
so exactly what does this look like going
Oh,
forward?
of course, I would tell you, it wasn't the most fun letter to author, and I think that also it wasn't very fun, going through the realizations of what the realities outside of the science were. So maybe you and I can talk offline about what
Sure.
all that entails. But I think it's always, really nice to be able to look at the science and say, this is how we do things. But when there's all these outside factors, again, that's things that I don't think this committee has to, realize.
the
But I will
commissioner's
say
office,
that
yeah,
these are things that we have to consider, and you can rest assured that, like, when you guys make a recommendation to us, we don't just blow it off. We're taking it serious, and we'd love to implement everything that we can that makes sense. But as some of you know here, we have other outside factors that weigh into this, so we have to be responsible for that. But that's the best I can say. I think that I think that at this point, like the letter was difficult to author because we don't want to diminish the recommendations from the committee.
Right.
So we would like to find a good balance for that. And I think that one of the things that I learned in this process is that I can probably do a better job of tempering some of the recommendations here in the committee to reflect the realities of that. So maybe we don't end up with a recommendation that is too far outside of the box of what's feasible.
Got it.
And so that's a balance that I can try to work on, but it's a difficult balance, and I'm still trying to work that out and understand that better.
Yeah, after years in academia, I've spent a lot of time on committees where recommendations weren't followed. So I think none of us want to spend our time and I'm not talking about this particular recommendation, really, I'm just talking about the structure going forward.
Yeah, sure.
But if we were to make recommendations that aren't followed, make recommendations that aren't followed, make recommendations that aren't followed, at some point,
Of course.
particularly the people here who work for state agencies, they don't have as much of a voice. And so I think it's really meaning that they can't speak freely sometimes. So I think it's really important that those of us who aren't play devil's advocate in these situations. So I have no agenda in raising this. I just wanted to say my personal impressions, and I just wondered our role going forward, if we could just try to remain clear on that.
And that's part of my reasoning, that I think that right now maybe we have a paradigm shift of, we've focused a lot on the Berm the last year and a half with this committee. So let's knowing that we're in a okay spot right now, perhaps we're missing some opportunities to reduce salinity by a few grams per liter, which I'm remiss that we can't fully take advantage of the runoff we're getting. But instead of dwelling on that, let's focus on the salinity management, the better mixing, some of the tools that we might have that can maybe relieve the pressure of the berm to be the only tool that we're using. Because I know there's other things that we can do. I mean, I have some thoughts on that I think, I'll bet you everybody has some thoughts on other tools that we can use right now. And so I think that's where the discussion should go, and how we can.
Zero.
When we went out, I don't think you were with us when the committee went out to tour the berm. But when we went across the west side of the lake, there's a massive amount of water coming in from the north arm. Right there. I mean, those are little things like, I don't know if we could even, I don't think we're measuring flows, but like right off the bat, why are we not blocking that water from entering the south arm? That's really dense. Dense brines, and that's a simple solution. And I think those little things can get, compounded. I think better mixing, so we're not sending, 40% mixed water across the berm. Like, those are things that we can do. They don't necessarily have to be at the berm, but please.
I remember prior meetings kind of touting the simplicity of the berm and its effectiveness as being, remarkable in the way that these types of changes could be made through tweaking, 150 feet of rock fill, rather than considering building miles of dikes and some other solutions. So it's just, it's a curious shift, but we just wanted to emphasize that it is, the simplicity of it was considered one of its strongest strengths. And I'm not sure, what role is being seen going forward for the berm, but just trying to emphasize that, it kind of does fit that bill as being very simple
and fast.
I don't disagree with that.
and inexpensive.
And the whole point is like, okay, so the berm works until it doesn't, until it erodes out, and then all of a sudden we have an uncontrolled factor that now we're trying to control. So perhaps there's a way to have like a more controlled weir that we can move boards rather than rocks. Something that is a little more engineered, so we can micromanage and take 6 inches off the top and be more intentional about how we modify the system. I don't think that I'm not talking about, dikes across the lake as our solution. I'm talking about like an engineered solution at the breach that perhaps was we talked about dikes not dikes, culverts, rather. So we're taking brines from the bottom where then maybe we don't have to worry about mixing so much and, sell that off. I think there's issues with the density on the north arm and having a sufficient head pressure, but I think there's those are things that perhaps if we start thinking outside of the box, we can find some other solutions. And again, I think mixing, we talked in this committee about sending water around Fremont, maybe opening that up so it has more time to get into the main body of the lake rather than doing that. So I'm not trying to say that I have even remotely close to an answer. I think it's just time to explore how we move from the rockfill berm as being our only tool to perhaps, improving that tool and looking at some other things that improve that.
Sure. No, I think discussing alternatives is a great idea. You need to have as many as you can think of. And we've got a lot of talent here to explore it, but just, trying to emphasize, don't sell the berm short from what it has accomplished. Make sure that we kind of keep in mind how.
And I'll just make one other comment to that too. The berm has been great. I tout that as like probably the thing that did, like, this is the one thing that the state has been able to do that impacted the lake in a good way. Like, we were able to see the results almost immediately. So I have no regrets about what we've done. I think we did exactly what we needed to do, but we're not always going to have Union Pacific there to do this work for us. So we got to figure out how the state is going to be able to go out and manage those things. We have funding for that, but it's not just how you move rocks. It's also, if we're scouring that out, where do you get new rocks out on that causeway? Like, trucking out the rocks that are necessary probably will blow through our entire budget. And we're using that budget right now, a lot of that, to fund the analysis that goes into the understanding, the effects of the inflows and the salinity in the lake. So it's a balance of, like, can we always rely on the railroad? Probably not. I think they're going to get sick of us at some point, especially if we're asking them to do it twice a year. I think there's just other factors that we need to weigh in. And so if it's something that we can reel back in a little bit and say, okay, the berm worked, we're in a good spot. We maybe staved off, the collapse of an ecosystem for now. How can we make this more efficient and better in the future? And if the legislatures are willing to fund the improvements, I would just say, why not? Why would we not seek something a little more advanced that we can manage easier and try to implement faster, perhaps even? So.
Okay, I'll give you a bumper sticker. Engineering and Great Salt Lake don't go together. And you'll tell me this next year that I was right, but anytime metal is involved, it's not a good plan. And I kind of don't trust, I don't trust who aren't engineers to come up with those solutions, e.g. legislators. But I understand the engineering will come from elsewhere. I'm just, I wonder if there really are engineering solutions that will work long-term, or they work a year and the maintenance is like so much money. So, like, whatever this budget number is, it needs to include a pretty high level of maintenance, plus a forestry fire state land office and that cave at Lakeside. You're going to need an outpost.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. And like I said, I think these are the investigations, Bunny. Like if we can sit on our hands and wait for the rockfill berm to be, again, like I said, I'm not going to get into the where we came from on the conclusion, but I think that we can sit here and we can let the outside forces tell us what we have to do and what's necessary, or we can try to be proactive and find other solutions. And you're right, metal doesn't, it's not going to be a long-term solution, so let's find the other solution. But I think engineering does work because the berm was engineered, and that's the premise of that, but we need to do the right engineering. So,
but the prison is a great example. It was funded by the legislature without, like, the geologic footings and analysis that needed to be done, and then that had to be an additional. And
that's even just more emphasis for why this committee is necessary. So if we get funding, you can rest assured we're working with the legislature to make sure that we're steering that, and that this any engineering would be brought before this committee. I think that's, again, why we don't just disassemble this committee because we think we're done. If we keep it going and have these these kind of conversations so we can find those solutions together. I certainly don't have all of them, and I rely on everybody in this room to come up with those, along with us. So it's a partnership, and I think there's some good momentum. So like I said, I know the feeling of that letter wasn't fuzzy and comfy, and it wasn't fun to write either, but
it was okay. I trust your leadership. So I just wanted to explore the ideas to know a little more behind the scenes. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Bill Johnson had his hand up too.
Yeah, the only thing I was bringing up is that we talked about engineering feasibility, and the concrete blocks or some other simple, structural components going to be what's needed, and they have to be designed to be retrievable without cables and things like that being permanently attached. Because metal just doesn't work. But there are options, and they're going to be simple. And so I hope when this does go towards engineering solutions that we're brought in up front, because what keeps happening in this conversation is fracturing of the knowledge that those of us who are working on the lake have. And so I hope that it doesn't get thrown to a room somewhere where people who aren't actually working on the lake are trying to dream up solutions for controlling that flow.
Yeah, Bill, thanks for that comment. I think that, you know, the intention is that the solutions are rising from the folks that are working on that. So, you know, like any of the ideas that I've had or that I've heard, I've brought back to this committee. I would expect everybody's doing the same thing. And I think that this will be the stomping grounds for like where we find those solutions, or at least the starting point for advancing those solutions or discovering whether they're feasible or if they're not. So that would be my intention. If the legislature chooses to fund anything and it comes through our division, then you can be assured that this is going to be the place where we, you know, start these discussions. And I'd even be happy to bring back, you know, if we're going to do this scope of work to investigate these engineering solutions, like this would be the place we do it. But again, we're kind of at the whim of, you know, the funding, whether it comes, and if it's not, then we'll just continue with the Rockville berm at the best we can under the paradigm we're in. But I appreciate that. I think, you know, that's my intention. And as long as I'm here, you can count on me to bring things back to the committee.
Great discussion. I think it certainly is going to tie into the long-term strategic plan that we're going to talk about later. Ben?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of touch on a little bit of what Bonnie was saying. That, you know, the letter, I know you didn't want to write this letter, Ben, but this group has never faced a letter like this. So I think that's probably why you're hearing some discussions about, well, what is this group? What are we doing? So I think at a minimum, and then also adding to the fact that we've got a commissioner, and we don't know what role the commissioner plays with this group, but I think it really begs the question about, you know, what our current charter stands for. So I think as a group, we ought to open that up. We have to figure out, you know, what is our role here for the group? Because I think otherwise, if we don't do that, I think I'm just worried we lose confidence of the membership of the group. So I think we really need to think about how to do that. I don't have any great ideas, but I also think like everyone here should play a role in helping to shape that, or at least be able to discuss some ideas. So that's what I just wanted to put forward.
Great, thanks, Ben. No, I think these are all very important questions, and I think maybe I'm going to call an audible and quick flip to this and hit this right where we're at now, because I think this is an important discussion. Because I think so here, this is our charter. I can zoom in a little bit more. And I think one of the, you know, as I look at this from time to time, I think it is pretty remarkable that I think our committee has achieved a lot. And I think, you know, one of the, just briefly, one of the key things, Bonnie, one of your questions was, you know, where does the Salinity committee fit? And just as a quick reminder, is that this committee was formed through an agreement that Forestry, Fire and State Lands had with Division of Water Quality and Union Pacific, because, you know, when they were building the bridge, and there was a need to make sure that we're not engineering solutions that are creating more problems. We want to create solutions that are solving problems. And so the committee was set up initially to do that. And yes, it does report to Forestry, Fire and State Lands and Water Quality. But there's also a mechanism where they wanted it to report to the tech team. And then also, obviously, the information will be forwarded to others, such as the advisory council. So I think the committee has certainly played in a very important role in really looking at, trying to understanding the science of the lake salinity. And just flipping over to the charter, I think the key objectives were, one was to develop partnership among stakeholders. And I think that's a huge yes, I think this has been critical in helping developing those partnerships, the trust that the different groups on the committee need to have to be able to make and face big problems like we have. So I think, and then there's a whole list of different things that I think the committee's done really well. I think number 2 is to guide the process of developing scientific understanding of salinity. And as we know, our understanding of salinity keeps improving, but I think, and as with science, as we learn more, it seems like we always learn that how much we don't know. So there's this balance of how do we keep pushing it forward? How do we focus on the elements that are most important? And I think, I mean, just looking at this is, identifying gaps in our scientific understanding. We had a research plan with questions, a common method to measure salinity. We've done that. How do we oversee the research? I think we've been providing input on that. And then I think the last objective here is really what we've been focused on, has been, evaluating the science and making recommendations to the state as to what can the state do, what should the state do. And this is where, we've talked about the salinity matrix, what is the appropriate salinity range? How do we even know we have a concern? When do we know we have a concern? And then the last item, 2 items here, is long-term management of the transfer through the causeway, interpreting the data, making recommendations to, regarding that opening in the berm, and identifying other possible actions. That's, exactly what we've just been doing. Even this morning has been talking about those things. And so I think I continue to learn more and more how dynamic the lake is. And it seems as if as soon as we feel like hey, we have a handle on things, the lake changes, something changes, and it's something new. And I think that's where this committee has played a very important role, is in helping interpret the data that different agencies are measuring, to keep an eye on what the changes are, and interpreting what does that mean, how does that influence the decisions or risks that we face. And then I think the last item here is an item on our agenda for today, is just to talk about, being able to develop a science-based long-term salinity management plan, where, we can't predict every change. But I think to identify, well, what are the key thresholds that we need to be looking for? What are the key tools that we have? Providing some guidance as to, if this, then this. And I think even there, as we've learned just in the last year or 2 since we've been modifying the berm, is that we make a modification and we see a different change, and we realize that, hey, we've got some more data gaps, or, just in the last 9 months, we've reconsidered how we calculate salinity in the water column, and what's important in the water column, and how to calculate the mass. So I think the work that this committee has been doing has been incredible. And I think it is important to acknowledge, I think when we first formed this committee, we thought, and this is back in 2018-19, when the lake was quite a bit higher, we didn't have this crisis of salinity that we've had recently. But I think it was amazing foresight to form this committee, because if we didn't, then.
Well, it wasn't magical thinking. Those of us working on the lake knew it was coming, right?
Yeah.
So I think it was really important.
Yeah.
Could you go back to the organizational diagram?
Yeah.
So where is the commissioner's office and where is Jizzleville?
This is about a 4-year-old diagram.
I know that, right? So that's why I'm asking the question. Like, that's why I'm asking the question of where we fit with everything now, right? So I think it's really important to re-examine this diagram and to put it into the current scenario, so that we understand how this information is getting somewhere or not getting somewhere.
Yeah.
And also what are tools we've developed that we can just hand off as tools, right? Because you checked through a lot of things we've already done. right? Mostly Christine. I still am advocating for raise, right? I say it every meeting. But it's really, really important that we understand what we've done, what our actions are, who, you know, how the information is being used or not used. Because it is frustrating. I have not been frustrated on this committee, so I'm speaking about other experiences. It's frustrating when people spend time on a committee and make recommendations and those recommendations do not go forward. And so just wanting to make sure that doesn't happen in the future, I think it's really important to know exactly, you know, how the information gets used and how our time gets utilized. Does that make sense?
Sure does. No, that's very important to the dynamics of this group, and I think how it feeds into the overall discussion, but certainly the management of the resources that we have. I want to, I guess, on that same token, is just this is, I think you've seen this before. Sorry about those check marks. I just added those. But this is the original research framework that we had, and this was really knowing that we want to build towards this long-term salinity management plan. And so our first phase was really evaluating how we, you know, measure salinity and how do we assess that. You know, we started to work towards the database. I know USGS has been working on that. You know, we've been working on understanding the salt balance, the salt dynamics. You know, in this time frame, we lost the deep brine layer, so our focus has shifted away from that and more on just on the overall salt balance. But we also talked about we wanted to have a user portal. You know, we have a hydro mapper that is certainly helping with that. USGS and I know UGS is doing work on updating the bathymetry of the lake. And we wanted to have some mechanism to be able to forecast salinity in the lake, you know, which is exactly what Christine's been doing this last year. You know, all to be able to have, you know, build that into some sort of an assessment tool and look at adaptive management strategies. And we had to, before we even had the plan, we had to make decisions as to how to modify the berm, you know, to adapt to the conditions we were seeing. And then knowing we want to tie into, you know, the hydrology, you know, what the water is that's coming into the lake. And I think that's where the basin integrated plan, the modeling that Water Resources is doing, is going to be very important, you know, to understand the water balance, lake level dynamics, and how does that feed into the salinity. And I think that's, again, something that we've been talking about, trying to incorporate the mass balance work that Christine and USGS has been doing with the work that Water Resources is doing on the water balance and lake modeling, being able to even potentially in the future tie that into hydrologic forecasts. And so I think, you know, we've been covering almost every one of these elements, and what we haven't really done is pulled that together into, I mean, we've been so busy managing on the fly because, you know, we've had the, I guess you could say it's crisis management or change management. We've had so much change that we've had to been having these discussions and making these changes on the fly. We haven't had the luxury of being able to step back and pull it all together into a plan. And I think that is certainly, and that's the last objective on this committee's charter, is to do that. And I think we have a lot of these elements to do that. And I think, you know, we're certainly integrating these things as we go. So I think the path forward for this committee is certainly to try to move this forward into a plan, to understand what are the management tools we have, you know, like Ben was talking about, and then how might those be used. I think, you know, as Bill pointed out, we don't want to just throw a structure out there because we think it's a good idea. We need to know how it's going to fit into the bigger picture, and you know, how is it going to be used, and what are the key concerns that this committee has? What are the objectives? What do we want to be accomplishing with an engineered solution? I think just about any engineer is going to want to know what's the basis of design, because an engineer can engineer something, but it needs to be based on what do you want this to accomplish? You know, what are the key criteria that we need to design for? And I think that's what we are moving towards, to be able to provide that kind of guidance. So I think in terms of I think a vision for what this committee needs to do is certainly, you know, the ongoing monitoring of how the lake is changing. Because if you all have a concern with where things are headed, that's certainly what Water Quality and Forestry, Fire and State Lands want to know. I think that's what the Commissioner's Office wants to know. But then I think also is being able to, you know, we evaluated, made some recommendations on the berms to how we could have the berm protocol that really help provide some guidance. But I think what we want to do as a committee is really shift to, okay, well, what are the key elements that we need to further develop to get this into a management plan, so that they have, I mean, nobody wants another document, but how can, you know, what are the key objectives or guidance that the state should be using, so that so it's transparent, everybody understands, here's what we're trying to do, and balancing all the uses of the lake.
Jeff, just a thought too on that, you know, the development of that salinity plan. I mean, that might be the document where we talk about, you know, disbanding this committee, and once that has been solidified and we have, you know, a solid basis on how we move water through the berm, and a protocol that's politically, legally, and scientifically feasible, then perhaps we either disband and make that part of the plan, or, you know, scale back our meetings to where we're meeting once or twice a year to just evaluate how things are going, and, you know, take those contracts that we have, like, you know, with USGS and others, you know, to feed the actions of the state to manage those systems that we already developed those protocols on. But I think that's part of the conversation is, you know, as we're developing this plan, what does that look like, and how does the Salinity Committee weigh in? Hopefully it's a plan that's can stand on its own two legs, and we don't need to meet every time we need to do a modification in that channel. And it's something that's been vetted, you know, fully through the scientific community and everybody. It's just something we can manage because we know what we have to do based on the conditions of the lake.
But these are my only friends.
I don't know. You seemed like you seemed like you were wondering what we were doing here. We can all get together. We can all get together and have yours with the committee. We'll make sure. So.
Well, I think every healthy organization has to keep evaluating why are we here, and what are we doing, and what do we want to accomplish. So I appreciate you bringing that up, because that's very important for us to do, especially as we kind of shift, you know, our focus from, okay, you know, I think Christine's numbers I was very encouraged to see that, okay, you know, in light of a decision that had to be made about not raising the berm, you know, that conditions today, you know, when you look at what might happen over the next 3 or 4 months, you know, I think there's some level of comfort there. We'll see, you know, how things actually evolve. But I think that's where this committee can help keep an eye on that and raise flags of concern. So I guess the one action item I guess I would have for all of you is, and I can send this diagram out to you, and also the list of questions that we developed, I think last fall. I think in August, September, we were going back into this, and what are the research questions that we still have? What should we do? And of course, Salinity were what they are, and what are we going to do? So that distracted from this, but I'll send this back out to you. And I think one of the key things I want to make sure we do at our next meeting is just prioritize, where do we think, you know, the state should invest its dollars. I know Forestry, Fire and State Lands has their Hot Topics grants coming out soon. You know, where should they invest their monies to make sure we're solving the problems that we have. So,
and a quick plug for that too. I think the next meeting's on the February 13th.
Yes,
right?
in the core center, not here.
Yeah. So the next tech team grant meeting, or excuse me, tech team meeting, we'll certainly be discussing management needs and where those information gaps lie. And I think that moving forward, we really want to have an emphasis on, where we have information gaps and how the research that would be conducted through these funds will help us advance our management of the lake. So I know there's all kinds of novel research that's interesting, and but how do we apply it to the management of the lake and make sure that we're doing what we need to do based on that? So I think that's a strong portion of the component of the the funding. So if y'all have ideas of where we have those information gaps, I'd love for you to send them to Marissa or myself, and we can make sure that we keep an eye out for those specific requests.
Yeah. And I think it's a perfect segue to Sam. I want to make sure we have time for him to talk through, because the work that he's done was identified as a need by this committee. It was funded in part through Hot Topics funds to help address these management questions. And I think it's been a very useful project. And certainly, I know the first time we raised the berm, a lot of that was based upon this work that Sam and his team have done. So go ahead and take over, Sam.
Thank you, Jeff, and thanks for inviting. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, and can you guys see my screen and see the slides change?
Sure can.
Okay, great. So yeah, this is like I'm speaking in front of the advisory committee after I think almost 1.5 years. So just that's why I have named essentially the talk past, present, and the future. And what I'll be summarizing today very quickly is kind of where we have come in the last few years, where we stand, and where I see going forwards, specifically focusing on predicting the flows through the West Crack Breach. And of course, none of this work would have been possible without the tech team grant and the funding from Utah Division of Forestry, Fire and State Lands, and some support from Salt Advisory Committee. And this has been a really enjoyable process working with USGS folks, Christine, Ryan, Mike Freeman, Andy Carlson, Scott, Einek, and then of course from Utah DNR, Craig and Leila. And of course, interacting all the way during this time with Jeff, Bill from U, and of course, Professor Wattsburg from Utah State. This is my team on the right-hand side. Along with me is Professor Brian Crookston from the Water Lab and Civil Engineering. We have been kind of leading this, me as a PI, and then of course he's helping. And of course, there have been a bunch of students who have helped with this work. So when I say past, present, and future, what I meant by past is essentially where did the modeling stand when we took over, and to an extent where it still is, especially when we are talking about it being coupled with GSLIM. So the model essentially was modeled by Holly and Waddell. Some of you or all of you know about it from 1976. It's a 2-layered gradually varying flow model. It was pretty cutting edge for its time. And essentially what it did was it predicted north to south flow and south to north flow based on water surface elevation on the two sides and the density difference. And though it was originally built for the culverts, those were the old openings on the causeway, but then this was modified and reused in the GSLIM model, and it's there now. Now, when I say present, what we have been doing, so I put in a laundry list, and I will go into a little bit of detail of each. So what we have built is over the years is the CFD model for 0, 4, and 6 feet berms. And this CFD model has not only provided us data to generate a dynamic rating curve, which I will talk about, but then it has also, as Jeff was mentioning, it helped inform the idea of feasibility of raising the berm, and if it will go on to actually even stop the north to south flow, the dense north to south flow. And I was really happy when it actually showed that it was doing its job back in 2022. And then of course, then we have also using all the data USGS has been collecting. We have built a different types of data-driven artificial neural network or an AI-based models. But these models mostly, all the models for the ANN-based models have been for the zero feed berm. And in the last year, we have also developed something we call generalized area-based index model, or GABI, which is again, but it uses the USGS uplooker velocity measurements, which USGS is doing at the West Crack Breach. And kind of what we are currently working on and looking into the future, what we are actually working on is a reformulation and re-implementation of Holy and Waddle model. Holy and Waddle did a great job again in 1976, but what we are doing is we have re-derived the equation, and now we are working towards re-implementing it so that this could work for any kind of berm height going into the future, and also modifying the equation so that it works for actually the trapezoidal channel sections we have now compared to the rectangular channel sections it was originally made for or developed for by Holy and Waddle. So with that, I just quickly, the CFD model, as you guys, some of you might remember, it's basically a model around the breach. I will not get into the details. We have a published paper and we have a couple of others coming up. We have extensively compared it against measurements when there was no berm. And of course, that gave us confidence about it, and it appreciably predicts what the flow is doing. And this, as I mentioned, went on to help us give a recommendation about what the 4 feet berm would do, what the 6 feet berm would do. And to an extent, what we have found is what the CFD model predicted went on, the reality kind of was not far off from that. So, and but then what else have we done with the CFD model? And I will talk briefly about it. But but what we have been also doing in the last year since the 4 feet berm went up was, after the 4 feet berm went up, we actually now had some measurements to compare our new CFD model, because the modified CFD model with the measurements seen when the 4 feet berm went up. And what we find is, as you can see on at the bottom, that actually we are doing a pretty good job in predicting. This is comparison against the uplooker velocity from USGS. And what we are currently doing is refining this model further and also waiting for the new bathymetry, updated bathymetry, which USGS has been working on, so that we could, so especially the bathymetry, which was measured after the berm height was raised to 4192, so that we could utilize that to update our CFD model. So now and in the future, we will keep on updating the CFD model. It's a great thing, the model. One big caveat is it takes time to run this model. On 8 CPUs, it takes, I keep on repeating, about a week to run one case, which makes it a very costly tool computationally, but a very important tool, especially if you want to assess a major geometrical change, something like what you guys were discussing. If there is a big engineering change coming at the West Crack Breach, it should be assessed with the CFD model, because apart from the flow, what this model can give you are stresses. So like after raising the 9 feet berm, the flow basically made a big hole in it, right? I think in my opinion, in my humble opinion, if we would have done a bit of CFD analysis of what could happen if we raise the 9 feet berm and then essentially the flow, and then we would have assessed the stresses, maybe we could have foreseen that what could have been done to stop that hole being generated or developed in that in the berm. So again, with the 6 feet berm data, sorry, by the way, if you have any questions, please stop me and for clarification. So we have run, and last summer or earlier in 2023, we ran about 40 simulations for the 6 feet berm. Now there actually no 6 feet berm, but we ran that case because it was between 9 and 4, and we thought maybe in the future, if it goes down a bit, we will be able to generate a rating curve for that. So using all that data, we have already developed a rating curve for what we call a dynamic rating curve for the 0 feet berm. And this is one of its kind. This is the first rating curve for a bidirectional flow. And on top of it, there we have come up with some correction factors which are based on velocity. And what we find is for the CFD data, these rating curves are giving us R squares of around 0.97 and 0.94. And these are really good for essentially coupling with any kind of salinity or salt balance model, like what Christine is developing, or coupling this with GSLIM. And the idea is that we will keep on improving this as more measurements come in, and we are actually going through that process of doing that at this point of time. Now, once we take the data from the 6 feet berm, we have also generated rating curve for the 6 feet berm. And essentially, if the committee and Utah DNR is interested, we will continue the process of developing these rating curve for different kind of berm heights, anywhere between 2 feet to 9 feet, or if it's going to be higher for the future. But again, I keep on saying it, these rating curves are good, but they take time to generate because the CFD is costly computationally. Then the next set of models is the ANN model, or the data-driven model. And in this, basically, we have major 2 class of it. One of the first class of it is we are calling the index ANN model. And essentially, the index ANN model takes as input the velocity profile from the uplooker, which the USGS has, and gives out the prediction of the flow from north to south and south to north. This is one of our most accurate models. The R square, the NSE of these models are, if you see for north to south, is as high as almost 0.98. And it is the data generated from this model which Christine used in her salt balance model in the last 1 year. Some of the results you might have seen. This was before the berm went up, the results for before the berm went up. And this is the data from this model which helped in improving the salt balance prediction, which Christine was doing. And I'm sure you guys are aware of it. And this is one of them. But again, this requires the knowledge of the velocity profile. The other side of it, say if you don't have the velocity profile, and that's oftentimes you don't have that, you only know about the water surface elevation on both sides of the lake and the density. For that, we have developed these, what we call big ANN and the windless ANN. And these are also pretty good with their prediction. The R squares were somewhere between 0.93 to 0.92. And these could also be used for and coupled with salt balance models and used to inform them. The only issue with them is at this point of time, because with any kind of machine learning or AI-based model, you need quite a good amount of high quality data. So these ANN models at this point of time, we only have for 0 feet berm. That was when the berm has not been raised. Because the amount of data we have for the time since the berm has been raised is almost only just about a year and a half. And also it keeps on changing, right? It's 4 feet, now it became 9 feet, and maybe it will go even higher and then come down lower. So maybe even though the ANN models are really great and going into though it may not be the best tool for adaptive management. Now, the third model, the third class of models we have is called the generalized area-based index model, or lovingly we call it GABI. And so this model, what it does is it takes the uplooker velocity data and it does some pretty simple math of take that data and divide it. You divide up the cross section into certain number of cells, and then multiply it with the area, and then use some sort of a kind of a regression-based correction factor to account for the fact that the velocity measured at the center of the breach is not necessarily a representative of the whole velocity. So you need a correction factor. And doing that, then we make predictions. The good thing about this model is agnostic to the berm height. So this model works even if the berm raised to 4 feet and 9 feet, and I will show you some comparison, or you come down or go up, but you need velocity measurement. And the good thing is, or the interesting thing is, currently this model is based on the old uplooker which USGS had, which basically was measuring only 10 cells. But USGS is putting in a new uplooker, and which will have almost 50 cells in the vertical. This will definitely go on to improve reduce the uncertainty and improve the reliability of a model like Gabby. And I will not get into the details of it, but the important factor is when we compared against USGS's monthly measured data, it is actually, as you can see, it is actually doing a pretty good job once we put in the adjustment factor. Of course, the north to south is doing better than the south to north. The south to north flow always has more uncertainty because it has oftentimes effects of wind playing a much bigger role in the south to north flow than north to south flow. And what we see is, what I have done is, apart from the table, larger table on the right-hand side, I have expanded on part of the table since the berm first went up to 4187 and to 4192. And what we are seeing is we are within a certain range within 40 to for most of the time we are within 40 to 50% error from what USGS is measuring when they go in and do the measurement at the breach every month. So, and the whole idea is, as we get in more data, because these are kind of, a bit of it is like a regression-based model, so we will keep on calibrating and improving it. But this is something that can work for any berm height. With that, what is the future? This slide is just a bit of a show off from my end and my group, my students, and we just list some of the equations we have gone in and gone through Ed Hawley's paper. And what we had to do was, as in Professor Hawley's paper, these equations were not very obvious, so we had to spend a lot of time rederiving it and coming up with them for the trapezoidal cross section. And now we are going through the process of implementing it for any berm height. So with that, what I will conclude is present and the near future. Again, just to summarize, what are the 3 main models we have at present? I'm not considering the Professor Hawley's model, which is there in GSLIM. I'm talking about what we have done. So one is the CFD model for 0, 4, and 6 feet berms. And essentially, we can do it for any geometry that needs to be analyzed, especially say 4192 or higher. What are the important points within it? It's important. I think this kind of CFD model is important for planning the effect of burn change hydrodynamically on the flow. The CFD model helps us to generate dynamic rating curves. Then and then these dynamic rating curves can be implemented with different salinity models. The only caveat is it requires large computational time, but I think if there is enough resources, we could, because till now we mostly run it on the one of the Utah DNR funded workstations we have, which allow us to run 2 simulations at a time. But if there is more resources, of course, and there is need, we can do many more runs very quickly. Like the 40 simulations I mentioned about the 6 feet berm we did during the summer, we actually what we did was we utilized Utah's engineering lab computers because students were not there. So my graduate student went in and he just put a ton of simulations parallelly on those computers. Yeah, we did that. And then the ANN model, which again requires training data, is again, I keep on saying it's our most accurate model, but it requires a lot of data to train it. And oftentimes this is not a really good if we are continuously changing the berm, because the amount of data we have for that time is limited. And finally, we have the GABI model, which is again again uses USGS uplooker velocity measurements, but again this model works for changing geometry. And finally, going into the future, just to reiterate, we are reformulating and re-implementing Hawley and Waddle. It will be again a 2-layer gradually varying flow model, but accounting for different berm heights and trapezoidal cross section. And what we are planning to do is we will using data-driven calibration techniques based on measurements that USGS will be taking and will continue to take. And finally, the big what next, I think to an extent, I would say we are reaching a point of I think we are kind of a year and a half away from doing the best, in my opinion, we can for the West Crag Breach. After that, I think it will only be improvement at the edges. But the next big uncertainty, and I think where we should be headed, is Bear River Bay. And with that, I'm open to any questions you have. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Sam. Any questions?
So I just from a public consumption, I think West Crack creates confusion. People don't know what you're talking about. So just to let you know that, Sam.
Okay.
Okay.
So should I be calling it the Union Pacific Bridge?
I would say yes.
The new Union Pacific Bridge.
The new Union. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
I don't have a question. I just want to say it's been really amazing to work with Sam and his ability to ingest a lot of temporally dense and complicated data, and working with his students. You know, they're generating some amazing models that really improve our understanding of the breach. And we kind of have recurring meetings with Sam, and it's just impressive what they've managed to do. So thank you, Sam, for your collaboration, and this is really great work.
Oh no, thanks, Christine. Again, the pleasure is mutual. It's working with USGS has been really good. Back at Illinois, during my grad school, I has worked with USGS scientists, and I knew what to expect. So I'm pretty happy that has continued here. So.
I have a comment as well, if that's okay. This is Ryan, USGS. So one thing about Bear River outflow, it's, as we know, so the Bear River is historically the largest source of fresh water to the lake, at least in terms of rivers. And we've attempted to gauge that site. I'm talking the Causeway Bridge, where Bear River Bay water flows out into the southern half of the lake. We've attempted to gauge that site in the past. And we've also attempted to gauge the bridge that's up from the Causeway Bridge, the Mineral Corporation Bridge. And, we had some successes in the past, but there was many challenges that ultimately played into the data not being a high enough quality to where we were comfortable maintaining those gauges and running them long term. And we are now looking at both bridges again and putting new technology in, and we started doing that at the Causeway Bridge. There's two non-contact water surface velocity sensors and 2 stage sensors now at the Causeway Bridge. Some of that funding comes from the Saline Lakes program, the USGS Saline Lakes program. There's also a little funding from the Forestry, Fire, and State Lands Hot Topics grant that's helping with our work there. The Division of Water Resources and the Great Salt Lake Commission are they've teamed up, are providing some funds for some discrete discharge measurements at that site. So we're building a data set at this Causeway Bridge right now, and including our historic data that is going to be invaluable for a modeling exercise now going forward. So I just want to point out that long-term data collection, sometimes it gets painful, sometimes it seems expensive, but it almost always pays off when we reach a point like this. And I'll tell you, one of the other challenges with the Causeway Bridge is it ices up in the wintertime. And we don't have a way to make a field measurement of discharge on that ice. It's too thin. It's extremely hazardous for our technicians. When technicians do ice measurements, they actually drill holes through the ice, so they're out working on the ice. We can't do that out there. So even if we can use our new technology to gauge during warmer months where we don't have ice, we don't have a great way to estimate flows during ice conditions. And so modeling is good. I think could really improve both understanding during non-ice conditions, but also when the system is iced up. So
great. Thank you. Yeah, I think that's the utility of the model, is really to help us look at those what ifs, as understand the system outside the bounds where we're measuring.
I have one additional comment. For years, we've had a request for the kind of work that SNOP's doing as one of the hot topics that we were trying to solicit research for, and SOM's the only one that has ever replied to that, and he's just an invaluable resource that we need to keep on our team, it seems like.
Thanks. Anybody else? Or Bill?
Yeah, some really nice presentation. I was just curious, in terms of the model applied to Bear River, is the idea to link what's measurable upstream at Corinne, or not Corinne, at I forget the name of the gauge station at just before the Bear River.
Compass mineral?
Well, no, I'm thinking about the main USGS gauging station on Bear River. And before it becomes a distributed system moving through the Bear River wildlife management area, and linking that flow to what you see downstream at the bridges, is that the goal? Or I'm just curious to know what you're headed there.
Right. Okay. So this is something we had Ryan and Christine mentioned, we have like bi-weekly meeting with USGS, and this was the topic for extensive discussion last week. And so it's a very uncertain system because you're absolutely right. The place, because any model, especially say we are running any kind of hydrodynamics model, we really want a good boundary condition at the upstream, right? So the place where we would like to start or would be the current gauge where we have measurement. But if we do that, then what happens is you have an extensive water flowing to the bird refuge where we don't know what the bathymetry is. The vegetation varies throughout the year. On top of it, there is human intervention through the canal system, right? Because they keep on changing the gate. So it's an actually extremely complicated system. So yes, we have bandied around the idea that maybe we need to model that. But if we go on to model what happens to the bird refuge, it might be a really difficult task. I'm not saying impossible, but very difficult task, especially I think due to the human intervention that happens. Right. They go on and change the gates. That is why my opinion is that if USGS can make some really good measurements at the Compass Mineral Bridge, which is just a little upstream from the Bear River Bay, then that could be utilized as a good starting point inlet for the hydrodynamic model. So that's kind of where we were at the last discussion. Ryan, you want to add something to that?
No, that's exactly right. So we're instrumenting the Causeway Bridge now, and we'll be working with Compass Minerals to see about instrumenting the Mineral Corporation Bridge. And we'll start with a stage and surface velocity sensor, or combined sensor, and then we'll be looking to have some kind of a submerged acoustic Doppler current profiler to get us information on the current through the water column. One of the big challenges of both those bridges as well is just the bottom of the channel is not stable at both sites. They're subject to scour and fill. So it's going to be a challenging effort.
And one additional.
I'm sorry. I'm just thinking about an AI model to try to, bring together our understanding about the combination of these surface diversions that occur all throughout those wetlands. And so ET loss, along with groundwater inflow. It seems like, in fact, an AI approach is going to be necessary to start to understand how to deal with that complexity between the grid gauge and the outflow, into the lake. And I don't know if you see a pathway for using an ANN or other type model for this purpose, but it seems, would you see that as being probably the most realistic way to approach this?
So when you say AI so are you talking about to predict or make some sort of prediction of how they make changes to the gates? Or are you talking about the AI replacing or augmenting the inflow models?
Yeah, more about understanding, in fact, what that gain or loss will be between those two places as a function of snowpack, for example, and other external forces.
True, because I think I agree. I think it has to be some machine learning augmented models but with machine learning, what we have learned in the last few years, there is two sides to the coin. One is it can give really good predictions, as we showed, but it requires a lot of data.
Yeah.
So we will need to see how much data we have to actually train this model so that we know that there is not a lot of uncertainty in what we are predicting, right? So, but yes, the good thing with AI or machine learning based model is sometimes if the system is extremely complicated and has things which cannot be mapped easily by physics-based method, it can tease out patterns out of the data.
Right.
But again, we need really good data, and hopefully that's where USGS comes in.
Greg had a comment.
These are good points. We've for years known that we don't really have a handle on the evaporation and the inflows and outflows of the wildlife management areas. And right now we've got a program to actually get some measurements and some data. So the data part we hope to be able to obtain in the next few years. And that's probably going to have to be an ongoing effort over a period of years in order to get enough data to actually model things accurately. But we're hoping to have all that data as part of the BIP. We internally don't call it the Jizzle BIP because we've been discouraged by other people not to say that term. So anyhow, going forward, I think there are going to be some answers, and we're going to have models for those things. That's one of the objectives, because you can't. I think modeling is probably the answer. After you've gotten all those measurements, we need to understand the actual physical processes that are going on. But we're working on it.
Jizzle BIP is a hell of a lot cuter than West Crack.
I think it was Mike Freeman, our solid field office chief, that started using the term West Crack, and he actually got that term from. There were other people out there working unassociated with the work he was doing, and that was just a term of endearment that they used.
Were they in the film industry?
I don't want to. But so yeah, our apologies. And I think Psalm's just.
Yeah, I will stop.
The lingo we've used in meetings. I generally say new breach. But,
Yeah, no, yeah. I think I will for sure make a change to that in the future.
Great. Well, thank you, Sam. That was a great presentation, and I think it is important work, you know, as we try to predict, well, try to forecast how changes might influence the lake, and our management options. Tools like that are critical. So, and I think, as we've talked about, is that collecting the data that helps develop those models and calibrate or validate the models is just as important, if not more. So otherwise, we're stuck with that big page of equations you had, Sam. I hope you got it right. So, but great work.
Thanks.
Yeah. I guess the last thing we had on our agenda was to talk about the management plan. I feel like kind of covered that. And I guess I don't think anybody would be opposed to get out a little early. But I think some of the key action items here are just to, I guess, Christine, appreciate you continuing to keep an eye on the forecasting. That's very helpful in just making sure we're on the right track, rather than but relying on the measurements that UGS and USGS make and thinking, okay, what do we think might happen? We actually have a mechanism, even if it's simple as you say. It provides us with some look ahead. I think another action item for me would be to get that framework out to you all, and I'll send you the questions that we already, the list of questions we had before. We kind of went through a screening exercise to identify, well, here are the questions we think we've already addressed. Here are the gaps that we think we have. What I want to really do is try to focus on, well, what do we think are the key gaps that we need to be able to come up with management criteria. So I think we have a lot of these tools, but I think back to what Bill was saying on design is I think this committee really needs to help provide guidance as to, well, what conditions do we foresee that we need to be able to manage for? What are the key criteria we're managing to? And because in the end, I think that's what the state will provide, or when they design something or come up, with solutions that's going to guide that design. I think more importantly is be able to provide them with an idea of what should we do when we see the lake change, and so then we don't. I think a committee like this with the expertise you all bring is going to be important, especially if the lake keeps changing. Hopefully it does change in a positive way. But I think a management plan helps diminish the crisis scenario where we're like, what are we going to do? We don't know what to do. And that's where you guys will all come in and really help. So, and then I think the last item I wanted to ask you all, down at the bottom here, Linda, we've been meeting on the fourth Thursday of each month, and I guess the next one would be February 22nd. And Jim, Ben, do you have any thoughts as to?
I think from my perspective, if we want to wait till extend the time between these, I think that's good discussion. If you all feel like these are happening too frequently, but I do think that these spring and winter meetings as we're shaping up with the runoff and, forecasting for what potentially may need to be done are pretty important. Like if there is going to be a time where we want to do anything to the berm, it's probably going to be around that February, April timeframe. So I would be happy to, have this, and maybe we can just slim it down to like an hour if we don't think we're going to, do that. And then I do think it would be prudent to start to line out the topics of, or, headers maybe on like what we want to do in that salinity management plan. And then maybe we can start to designate some sub-working groups or things where we're not having to do it all here in this committee, but rather give some folks some time to work outside of this at their leisure. So that would be my preference, is that we keep the meeting and slim it down if it doesn't seem like there's anything to discuss.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
No, I agree.
Maybe one of the agenda items is to discuss if we need to schedule, like, if the meeting should be seasonal, as you're pointing to, like we do with GSLAP, or if, for the purposes of this committee, what were the times we need to meet regularly versus emergency.
And I think in the past, we had less frequent meetings and kind of ramped up when we were getting into this burn thing. So I think that would be great to get it back to quarterly and still have that ability to call emergency meetings. We updated our charter to allow, so I think that'd be fine and that'll work. It's a great agenda item.
Bill?
Yeah, I think seasonal meetings would be fine, except what I want to just stress is that this committee is, it's got this mix between academic, federal, state, and extraction company and industry. And in my experience, that's unusual, and I may not get out enough, but that's been really powerful. And in terms of long-term objective, we had a wet year last year. We're going to have a reasonable year this year probably, but we know these come in clumps, right? The Great Salt Lake Strike Team points out this periodicity, and we are no doubt going to be facing crisis again in the next decade, and if not sooner. And so we need to be thinking about the competing beneficial uses of the lake, the tension that can arise between mineral extraction and brine shrimp harvesting, and all these things that are impacted by the way the lake is partitioned. And so I do think that a longer term objective for this committee is to explore partitioning options in the lake that in fact alleviate some of the competing interests under conditions of lower lake level.
A great suggestion. I think that that's certainly a key goal of the plan, is to really think about how do we balance not just understanding the science of it and understanding what the options are, but then the actual design, the decision criteria, the logic that's used needs to reflect those, how we balance those uses. So I guess one question, I guess in terms of managing the berm, each month we know a little bit more about what the snowpack is looking like. If we didn't meet until March 28th, at that point we're going to have a pretty darn good idea as to, are we all happy or not? But at that point, is it too late to raise the berm? I guess I'm wondering, do we wait till February or March?
If we waited till February, I mean, the reality is that it's going to take some time to mobilize and get Union Pacific, out there to do those things, and there's going to have to be some discussions. And so I think if we were to have that February meeting, and we'll, in a month, we're going to have a pretty good idea what the winter's shaping out to be. So I think that would be, again, I think it's good to probably just keep that, and that if we need to forego the March meeting, I think that would probably be more appropriate.
Okay. All right. Let's do that. So February 22nd will be our next meeting, and and the key agenda items will be, I guess, updates on where we are on the lake. Talk about I think outlining the management plan would be a great idea. I think if there's a chance the legislature provides you with funding on engineered solutions, you know, that another agenda item is criteria for those. So. Anything else? All right.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I would presume then that we'll see Tim all the time when we meet.
Yes, and I apologize. I should figure out if there's anybody I don't know. It's Tim Davis, Deputy Great Salt Lake Commissioner. You know, there's the legislature going on, so they callously kept me up there earlier. So, but yes, I plan to be at all those meetings as well. So, I'm sorry I missed the discussion earlier, but yeah, if you have any questions, please let me know. And
All right. Entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved. All right. I'm gonna say it's unanimous. Thanks, everybody.